Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for finding a seat. Okay, we are moving into the last section of the work that we are doing together today. My name is Dawn Brennan, and Tammy Isaacson and I will be wrapping up this afternoon, and then we'll be followed beautifully by art, by the Poet Laureate of New Westminster. So it will be a lovely end to what has been a full day. So, you're going to get, right now, the report backs from the tables that you were all at. I'm going to ask, if they are not already in place, but they look like they are, that the reporters all be seated in the front row. I'm going to call you up by table name. Don't forget to introduce yourselves. You'll have 2 minutes, and I'll give you a wind-up signal at about 30 seconds before you are supposed to wind up. The reporters actually have a double-edged job here. So they are reporting back on their sessions, but they are also listening to the people who are speaking ahead of them. I'm going to ask you as a reporter, if you have a point that's already been made, please don't make it again. We've got the point. It'll be captured by Sam and in the minutes, but please edit your remarks if you feel that topics have been covered. Okay? So, could I please have table number 2 come up? And one of the things that I did while all the tables were meeting was I just sort of floated from table to table and listened to little bits of what people were saying. And when I was at table number 2, the comment was made that we need to give the government the ammunition. And that was followed by a comment from Neil who said, "Let's see Sam draw a picture of that."
My name is Kenji Maeda, Executive Director at Doxa Documentary Film Festival.
My name is Barbara Chirinos, Executive Director of the Granville Island Cultural Society.
So for question number 1, some of the challenging issues that we identified were about attracting audiences and, of course, making arts and culture relevant. So that means not only accessibility for the audience themselves as they come to our venues and our spaces to experience the art, but also about the artists creating the art and how do we make the work relevant. And the other major piece was around early introduction of art for youth. We've seen sports obviously is ingrained in the school system from a very young age. You go to gym class every week, but arts is not necessarily as a priority in the education system. So if we start to educate youth by ingraining arts as a valuable resource, then that's where we'd want it to start.
Great. Thanks, Kenji. Can you hear me? Excellent. So question number 2, what are the best ways for the arts and culture sector to work with government toward solutions? And, as we've added, and the private sector. Our first answer was speak plainly and being honest. Just to expound upon that, some of us, when writing grant applications, can probably be our worst enemies in terms of quote-unquote art speak. Having sat on a couple of adjudication panels, it's very, I understood possibly a little more than, is it close to 2 minutes? Close than some of the government officials that were sitting with us, and if the application were written a little more plainly, it probably would have been easier for the planners that we were sitting with. Also, sharing best practices that other government agencies are using is a tool that we can provide in terms of arts and culture. And the last, ammunition for demonstrating government success in supporting the arts, validation through the arts industry.
And last thing, for number 3, we just wanted to reframe the question that was asked. And it was around how should Art Summit be framing the discussion within the communities. And for us, it was about this them factor of going into the communities. This is all about us as well, around how do we buy in to the work that we're doing today, not only the buy-in from the other communities. So that was a big piece around how do we have those discussions.
Right, and the last question that we came up with was why are we not involving the private sector in an arts policy discussion? And that's it for table number 2. Thank you.
Okay, not that I'm keeping score, but that was 2 minutes and 54 seconds. I'm going to ask table number 8 to come up now. And actually, sorry, just before I do that, could table number 2, could all the people at that table stand up so we can see who you were? Okay, let's show them a little love. Thank you. Table 8, if you could come up. And when I was passing by table number 8, they were discussing asset-based community development.
All right, so I'm going to be really fast. All right, okay, so somebody said arts education, so I'm leaving that out altogether. We wanted to make sure that visibility and publicity and marketing and geography were included in the sort of concept of the problems that we might face in trying to develop this arts policy. So, and connecting across the sectors, collaboration, making sure that the general public has value of the value of arts and culture. So that was question number 1. Did I get that? Table 8? Is that okay? All right. Okay, question number 2 being what are the best ways for us to work with the government? We talked about the fact that working towards a cultural policy, what a great thing is to bring that information to the government, that we also need the arts to community to be part of other policy conversations, so that there's like healthy communities, tourism, and the environment, and that we engage with local government and politicians in regular activities, that we worked with the government in terms of research as well, make sure that we know what the size of the sector is. We talked about the creative sector rather than the cultural sector, rather than arts and culture. We talked about the creative sector. I thought that was really a good one. And that there'd be a go-between group between the creative sector and the government. And then for question number 3, we talked about asset mapping. So so in other words, if we're going into these communities, and sort of opening up the discussion for the entire province, what we need to know is what is already there. What are their best practices? I mentioned that in Nanaimo, culture is the fourth pillar of sustainability in their overall cultural plan. So that kind of thing. What are the commonalities? Be open, have no preconceived notions, and listen cross-sectorally and cross-disciplinarily. Okay.
Table number 8, please stand up. Very nice work. And only 1 minute over. Table number 7. Let's have table number 7 come up. The topics at the time that I passed by were motivating factors, influencers, and exploration. Thank you.
And now I'm wishing I transferred all my notes to a small, manageable piece of paper, but here we go. I'm Zaina Campbell with the Dancer Transition Resource Centre and also on the BCC committee. So for number 1, challenges, we talked about a few different things. One of the key things that we noticed is even though we were trying to separate out economic factors, all of the different challenges that we spoke of sort of came back down to resources. So we talked about artists, cost of living, housing, affordability, the value of professional art practice and being paid for your work, and the challenges of that being rooted in funding issues again. Another area that we talked about that was related to money was capacity. So areas of professional development, human resources, challenges of overlap in programming and competition between different organizations doing similar work. So how can we work to do more collaborative efforts and manage our resources better? Another area that was mentioned was education and the cancellation of arts programming and education as being a major problem in BC. So there's number one. One last thing that was mentioned was different innovations that are happening. For example, funding for emerging artists is a promising thing. So number two, I'll pick that up later. Tools for government. Tools to give to government. We talked about understanding government, understanding their timelines, their priorities, their budget, mandate, and scope, understanding who does what, where the influences are, what might be of benefit to them, and really knowing who to speak to and how. Some examples, we talked also about, is it better to have a unified voice or represent distinct voices and nuances within our community, and the pros and cons of that. So within that, we thought it was also very important to offer research, including research about the creation of jobs, stats and data, social values, health, education, tourism, all demonstrating our value. Dialogue and meetings was our third thing that we talked about, and just keeping the conversation going and speaking their language. Almost done. Roundtables. We talked about a few questions that would be good to ask everybody. One is, how are we doing regarding growing arts in BC? How can we improve and do this better? What are our values and principles? Should we present a draft vision? What would make a difference? What kind of tangible action items can we offer? Quick wins that would pay off and show results early, and identifying areas of gaps and areas that we could contribute in terms of research. Maybe even talking to government about funding some further studies to be able to support better funding. So.
I know that one of the important things as an arts administrator is evaluation. And so having evaluated how long it takes for everyone to give their presentation, I'm moving to 3 minutes. And that will still be a challenge for some of you. So I'm going to, table number 7, stand up, feel the love. Thank you. Table number 3, come on down. And when I was at table number 3, the comment was made, culture is who we are, not what we do.
I'm Patrick Smith, the Vice President of Arts BC, and I'm the Artistic Director of the Ptarmigan Music and Theatre Society. The challenges outside of money, there are other issues besides money. Engaging communities in the arts and getting them to take part, especially in rural communities. There can be a lot of isolation. There are many stay-at-home communities. People don't go out to presentations that are happening there. We also identified that technology is getting to be an issue, that people stay home and watch YouTube rather than going to a live performance in their own community. On the part of municipal governments, there's often fear of controversy or fear of engaging in the arts. They're worried about offending the public. We identified finding effective board members and the problem of engaging diverse audiences and communities. So those were our answers for question 1. Question 2. What is the best way for us to work with government? The best way for us is to tell our story. Government needs to know what difference the arts and culture sector is making to the communities that they represent. So we need to tell our stories, and not only us to tell our stories, but to have the segments of our communities come out and tell the stories themselves, you know. and to keep the relationship with people in government, that is both bureaucrats and politicians, to keep that relationship going, to keep up the rapport with them. All right. Question 3. What would we say to communities at the round tables? We would say, what are your strengths? What are your successes in your cultural community? And what are your shortcomings? What are the pillars of your cultural and artistic communities? Am I done? 30 seconds. Okay. We should accumulate some basic data about a community before we start the discussion with them about population, cultural mix, what finances the community, what are the businesses and industries there, what are their needs, how would mentorship and collaboration work for them. That could be collaboration and mentorship by other communities who have addressed problems already that they may be looking at. So.
Oh, okay, well, thank you for that. I'm going to ask table number 9 to come up. When I was there, they were discussing socialism, animosity, and cynicism, so I'm really looking forward to this.
Hi, I'm Peter Sandmark, Executive Director of the Pro Art Alliance in Greater Victoria, and I'd like to thank our speechwriter, Joseph from the Vancouver Opera, for this. First question, the challenging issues and institutional inability on the part of arts organizations to effectively evolve for audience engagement in a 21st century business reality. Thank you. Our graphic was a bridge. It was a bridge. Question 2, working with government. Acknowledging a long history of rancor and animosity between the BC creative sector and the provincial government, are they here? And committing to a process of relationship repair that is candid and transparent and that celebrates the collaborative potential of arts and culture. So we're looking positively towards it. And we did have one voice. He's a professional speechwriter. Actually, I'm going to add on, and we talked about, we need to identify what are our common goals with the government. It wasn't apparent that we have goals in common. Question 3, and I think grassroots space was in our graphic on that one too. And for the third question, greater collective insight is required with respect to the working conditions for artists and communities beyond Vancouver proper, and the role that individual champions play. These and other key indicators can illuminate the role and perception of culture in these communities and help us to identify opportunities for activities like an arts summit to increase dialogue to these ends. Thank you.
The first group to come in at 2 minutes. Thank you, table number 9. Good work, Joseph. Okay, let's have table number 6 up. Their discussion when I was there was around strategies for access, so they were actually on topic.
Okay, I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that. Hi, I'm Shahrazad Cooper, a BC-raised performer and academic. I'm speaking for Table 6, and I will be brief. Our answer to question 1, we identified 3 challenges, one being spectator development, which isn't just about bringing people into the theater, but about actually allowing spectators to develop in the way that they experience work. The second is the definition of arts within the community in terms of how do we see arts, how do we place arts. The third is the role and understanding that the hierarchy of job values impacts the way that we are received by our wider community, often detrimentally. answer to question 2, we had a nice little alliteration, mutual mandate meeting, which meant coming to the table with solutions and understanding how we can help each other. Also to use clear, simple messages to deliver whenever we do gain access to officials, which can be challenging. And in answer to question 3, some of the hopes we have are we need data, so a transparent process that allows for shared statistics and information, as well as bridge building with other invested parties such as academia or sort of subfields like arts education, so that there can be a transparency of process that allows for there to be community as well as government buy-in all the way up. Thank you.
I was just here for moral support. I was the facilitator of 6, and Scheherazade, of course, told a wonderful story. I just think with the government sector, I think if we could sing natural gas out of the ground, we'd be like rocking, I think. But yeah.
Thank you, tables. Table 6, stand up. There, thank you, excellent work. I'm going to call table 10 up next. When I was at table 10, Minna had the floor, and she was discussing statistical data and critical thinking. And when I came back, Minna had the floor, and she was talking about her best friend.
Thank you. My name is Sharon Evans, and the reason you don't know me is I've been back in BC for 3 weeks after 13 years in Alberta, Calgary specifically, and I love some of the conversation about, the Stampede being a cultural event, and it is for Calgary. It took a bit getting used to when I first got there. My background is costume and set design. I've worked as a coordinator of volunteers in arts and culture, homelessness serving, as well as immigrant serving. And because there was so much conversation about sports, I also happen to be a master's track and field athlete, so I feel like a whole human talking. So what's great is I should be able to keep it to 2 minutes because so many of the things have already been discussed, but we'll start with number 1 and talking about the issues. Just reiterating that we haven't been on the public agenda for a while, and it's, I guess, being back on the public agenda is really important. Also, just looking at the perception of arts as elitists and inaccessible by the general public, including my husband, and lack of awareness of how art touches lives and really communicating that. A few other things, just talking about fear, and I know fear was mentioned earlier, but in this case, it's the fear of creativity, and just looking at the barriers to entry and participation. Number 2. We're just down to a couple points here. To approach this as an advocate, not an adversary, and I think one of the other tables kind of alluded to that, and working with elected officials, regardless of government party, but to keep on the public agenda. So once we're there, let's stay there. And looking at where meeting places might happen and having creative solutions maybe to where those meeting places happen with government, coming up with experiential ways to share what art is really like with government and ultimately to communicate the importance of art to the general public. And finally, what's on top of the agenda in different communities. And we said, well, we have some pretty broad questions we want to ask. Some of them might be too broad, but this is what we came up with. First is the question, what do you want? And to see what the answer is, and the answer might be quite varied. And then we said, okay, well, let's drill it down a bit and say, what kind of creative culture? We came up with the term creative culture and said, yeah, we're going to keep that, even though it was mentioned earlier and that someone else has something similar, but whatever. What kind of creative culture do you see in your community? And asking that really important question. So, also, thank you to Table 10. We had Mina, Brad, Donna, Sonia, Dawn, Allison, Karen, and Diana.
Stand up, Table 10. Okay, let's have our second last table, table 5, come on down. And when I was there, I heard Roxanne say, what's beneath the question?
All right, table 9, we see your 2 minutes, we raise you a minute 45.
It wasn't.
All right. So
go.
for all of our questions, I'm Shayna Goldberg from Pi Theater.
Danny Fecco, Boca de Lupo.
So all of our questions kind of revolved around the idea of value and how do people value, how do we value culture, arts and culture. So I know value's been said before, but it's also about for number one, the disconnection of us to our audiences, this elitist belief, the fear and intimidation of actually coming to a production not understanding what they're seeing. We also think that validating the arts as integral and valuable is necessary. And
we were also speaking about the disconnection between the artistic disciplines, that there's a lot of similar conversations happening within disciplines, and how do we unite so that we're not all just talking around the same thing all the time. For the second one, the big word that came up for us was transparency on both sides. Being clear about what we actually want and what we actually need, and also what does the government want from us. And in this particular point, we were speaking about the example of a gaming grant where they're not necessarily looking at how we articulate our artistic values, but sometimes it's somebody that's never seen a show before that's checking off the statistical boxes. So really understanding what the process of each grant that we submit is actually going through. And then we also spoke about, are there ways to do standardized ways to report, and standard and shared language in terms of reference that we all understand. Oh God, so close.
Okay, going to number 3. Some have already been said, but we're going to go through. We really made a list of questions that we would want to ask. So what do you do?
What does culture mean to you in your community?
What is your relationship to the arts and culture? What kind of stakeholders are you?
How would you benefit from a cultural policy? 147.
Ladies and gentlemen, a world record. Okay, can we see the members of that table, please? Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, I'm going to call table 4 up. When I was there, they were discussing the cultural priorities of Whistler, and apparently snow clearing is number 1.
Hi, I'm Margot Graham, arts, or maybe we should redefine cultural consultant. From table number 4, the threats or challenging issues when you take away funding are number 1 was human infrastructure and succession. Just take a look at the room. Also ensuring that arts are inclusive of BC's diversity, which we broadly define to include age, gender, and ethnic and cultural diversity. Number 2, how does the arts and culture sector work with the government? We need to work with the government we need to work with them to strengthen the understanding that culture provides social cohesion. We need to set the bar higher of the value of what we're contributing, and good data helps that. Number 3, what do we need to learn from the communities and the roundtable discussions? We need to understand how the communities value the arts and culture, or not, and what are the outlets and barriers for cultural expression within those communities. Thank you.
And the record has fallen and does go to table number 4. So just before I hand the mic over to Tammy, because I'm reluctant to let it go, I do want to take a quick look at some of the work that Sam has been doing. So Sam has been madly scribing all day. I'm sure he'll go home with carpal tunnel. But so what he did on this page was he looked at the 3 questions, and he's not quite done. But the big notes that you gave him on those the pieces of cardboard, he's taken those and he's tried to capture the key concepts. So under the first question, and a lot of this was touched on when people reported back, audience development, speaking to the unconverted, how do we reflect diversity, looking at values, validating arts as integral, building up the value of the artist, fear by audience that they won't get it. Minna's been breaking that down with her best friend. She gets it now. The engagement. Needs to be relevant. How can arts be part of everyday life? We've institutionalized engagement and barriers, staying home, watching videos. Communicating how art touches lives, communicating online, not art versus economy, geographical barriers, promotions, looking at sectoral issues, board development, infrastructure, human resources. We need to evolve, move away from silos. Education, arts ed in school. I heard that at several tables. Build value from an early age, professional development. Again, barriers to entry. Under the second question, what are the best ways to work with government? Be one voice. Research, data, use plain language, practice best practices, share them. Tell the story of the impact. Use personal experiences, speak the government's language. Culture is social cohesion. What are the community impacts? How do we frame things? How do we be clear about what we need? Stay on the agenda. The last question, what do we need to learn from communities? And this will be filled out, so it'd be great at the end of today if you can wander by and see what else has come on the board. But what does culture mean to you? Not us versus them. Success stories. Who's not at the table? What do you need? What does your community need? What creative culture do you see in your community already? Barriers, asset mapping, understanding priorities, engaging the private sector, and who are the champions? I think in this room we've got lots and lots of champions. So the question is moving and getting champions outside of the people in this room. So Sam, beautiful work. Thank you very much. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Tammy Isaacson of Canopy Arts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have been very encouraged from what I've been hearing in the room today, encouraged by seeing the progress from last year's summit, and really looking forward to the contributions from the regions and getting their participation in the roundtables. I found it was quite hopeful today to hear the minister talk about a vibrant cultural sector and strong cultural strategies. I thought it was exciting to hear about the cross-ministerial working group and the progress from the Where Next BC, and very exciting to hear about the progress in the social policy framework and what we can learn from them, and they're starting with their endorsements on their initial statements. And it was a great discussion about the question of definition in arts policy and cultural policy. So I was asked to summarize the points coming out of the discussion this afternoon, and we have over here a visual representation, and so I just pulled some other comments. There was a lot of overlap, very similar ideas coming out of all the different suggestions, and you're welcome to have a look at these individual cards. But I just pulled out some little nuggets that will go into the pool for later. So for question number 1, engaging audiences and a diverse community. So this is related to what's the most challenging issues. Arts is part of everyday life, and connecting that in a real way in community. Fear of and barriers of participation. The perception of arts as elitist, arts education, geography, competition, bridging the community and professional arts, infrastructure, HR, affordable housing, work spaces. So that's sort of some of the main nuggets from the first question. The second question, the best ways to work with the government, transparency, impact stories, annual consultation with our sector and the government, matching priorities, and what are those priorities? Can they be matched? Arts Day at the legislature, working together on research, stats, and data, being aware of the government priorities, best practices, speak plainly, grassroots voices. And in the third question, learning from the regional roundtables, how would you benefit from a cultural policy? What support is needed? The outlets and barriers to creative expression, and who are the champions? Asset mapping, involving the private sector, success stories, champions, understanding what the priorities are from the regions, and identifying gaps in research. So these are just some nuggets that I've got here today. I just wanted to take this opportunity to ask the floor now if there was other things, any burning issues, ideas, or questions that you want to make sure is brought up before we leave today.
My mic works, yours doesn't.
Hello?
Oh, it does.
Now mine does too.
The one thing that we did touch on briefly, but it's the impact of digital technology as a challenge for question one, and I'm not sure. It's so big. It's so big. I think we forgot it. You know, it's affecting music and film and television and arts and theater because people are online. You know, it's affecting everyone. So, as far as a challenge for arts and culture, I think digital technology is a huge challenge. And I think, like I said, I think it was just so big we forgot it.
Great.
Me? Hi, I'm Alma Lee, and I was the founder of the Vancouver International Writers Festival. One of the things that constantly confuses me, or annoys me actually, with these kinds of discussions that we have is it's always called arts and culture. Now, the person from Calgary talked about how stunned she was that the Stampede was considered a cultural event. Well, hockey is a cultural event, and hockey has got nothing to do with art, nor does the Calgary Stampede. So I don't understand why we can't call ourselves the arts and creative culture sector. But to add culture into our sector that's not transparent to people in the government.
Okay, thank you.
Just in regards to the last question, before we actually get to the point of asking questions at the round table, I think we should think about structurally how we get people to the table and who we get to the table. And I think that there needs to be diverse representation in terms of ethnic diversity, gender, sexuality. All of the boxes need to be ticked. And then also for these types of summits, I'd like to suggest that there are comps provided to particular individuals or organizations in order to ensure diversity in conversations like this, in terms of age as well. So we have a younger contingency, and perhaps, again, a more ethnically diverse contingency as well.
Great, thank you.
I have two hands up over on this side. We'll start here.
I actually just want to second everything that you just said. There was a long conversation at our table regarding whether or not, or really how, we can involve First Nations communities once we're leaving Vancouver. Are we focusing only on the municipalities that make it on the map, or a lot of the First Nations communities that are totally unserved around this province currently? Yeah, and other conversations regarding multicultural issues. It's a very white room, including myself.
Yeah,
You have one over there, and then I have one back here.
I just wanted to speak to the digital media thing, and I personally feel like it's less of something that's in our way and something we need to embrace. There will always be new things. I mean, the opera outlasted a VHS tape. So there's always going to be something new. There always has been and there always will be, from radio to TV to YouTube to whatever it is. So it's our job to stay relevant, and to make sure that we're still at the forefront, and to embrace those mediums as ways that we expose ourselves to other markets.
Right. Thank you.
I think I had another hand up here. Laurie?
I think going back to the diversity as well, and this has been touched on, but I don't think has really come to the fore, is the diversity of voices that aren't arts, creative, and cultural, but who appreciate what arts, creative, and cultural community brings. We keep talking about how much we benefit health and welfare, education, all these other sectors. We need them at this table so that we're not just harping on our own self-benefit, but we're actually showing the benefit throughout the entire community.
Right. Thank you, Laurie.
Anyone else? Oh, one down there. Anyone else up here while I'm up here?
I got him.
One thing we touched on in our group with the question of government, I think what works best for the government and for us is to really push for multi-year funding so that we as organizations can, not write that same grant every year, and government doesn't have to have an adjudication committee every year. If you're a stable society, theater company, whatever it is you are, it should be 3-year funding minimum. Thank you.
Anyone else up here or down there? Nope. Tammy, I think it's back
I
to you.
guess that's it. Yeah, great.
Thank you very much, and we're turning the floor over to Kevin.
No, actually, Rob.
I want Kevin to join me here because I'm likely to forget somebody, and I can't possibly thank everyone who's been involved here. But first and foremost, I want to thank Kevin McKeown. Kevin's the producer of this event and drives this initiative inside our office and with all of the various committees as well. But there are many facilitators, dialogue leaders, panelists who participated today. I want to thank all of you for being involved. And many committee members who worked through the year, lots of people who participated in conversations through the year. I just want to acknowledge it's a really ongoing process. And I also want to really make it clear that we don't believe this just started last year. For so many of you, this has been an ongoing conversation for a very long time, and people like Laurie Baxter have been driving this from years ago, really foreseeing what's needed here. And I think that all the steps we're taking right now are an accumulation of momentum that's been building for a very, very long time. So to all of those people who've been working on this in every community and in every sector, thank you for all of your work. I want to mention Zaina Campbell, who was my personal sounding board through this week as we were kind of fine-tuning some of the final content here. And I want to say that I appreciate the generosity of all of the input today, what you were contributing as participants in the summit at the table discussions, in the panel discussions. It's a very thoughtful group. And all we're trying to do here, and with your help, is to convene and advance a conversation that leads us toward a common goal. So without all of you participating, we wouldn't be getting anywhere. So I think this goes back to where we left off last year at this time, which is a call to action around involvement, carrying forward. Many of the comments, particularly at the end of the day today, are a challenge to all of us in how we proceed with engagement around our progress on the topic of the policy framework, how we engage with communities, how we can be more effective in bringing diverse voices to this conversation. And so I would like to challenge all of you to dig into your toolkits and into your networks and to help us to make that engagement happen, because we need a lot of help and a lot of people working on it. And Tammy, I want to just come back to you for a second, because I know that you had an anecdote that, and I would like you to share it, if you wouldn't mind. And then we have, and I'm going to pass to Kevin for any final thank yous, because there were, of course, partners who were involved in presenting this. I'd like him to acknowledge all of them, but I'll ask Tammy to come back and share a little story, and then we'll be able to close the day with some words from Candace James. So, Kevin, to you. Tammy? And just...
I realized when I was preparing for the summit today that I actually had a story from when I was very young that I think relates to what we're doing here today. I grew up in an activist family, so I was out, by the time I could walk, I was marching and demonstrating and on the picket lines and all that kind of stuff. And my mother was the person on the back of the pickup truck with a bullhorn rallying the troops down Main Street. So I grew up with some very strong and loud values. And when I was about 10 years old, I was taken to a women's conference, and the topic that they were talking about was equality for women. And I don't remember what they talked about, but I do remember how I felt. I remember sitting in the back of the room and thinking, well, I was shocked. Why would you even discuss that as an issue? How is that an issue? Why is that important? Of course, it was a given, right? To me, as a small child, it was a given. So I was kind of stubborn, and I pursued that stubbornness in my life. And now looking out in the world, I think I was wrong, and I should take some responsibility for my decision for inaction. So today, I've spent my life as a cultural worker, and I realized I have these given values that I'm pretty sure are very similar with all of you here in the room, that there is, of course, the arts are valuable. Of course, they should be supported. But I think we're at a point where we have to be willing to debate. We have to keep talking about it. And the arts policy, I think, is a way for us to take our values and our beliefs and share them with the broader society. And so this is kind of like a do-over for me. So thanks.
Thank you, Tammy, and thank you, all of you. This has been a great turnout and an inspiring day, and in response to one of the things about generational change and succession as being among the issues, I just want to say that after I've now realized 45 years, one way or another, working in this field, it is comforting to me to see some of my generation, to see Anthony Norfolk and Elma Lee still on the bridge, taking a hand in these things, and the middle generation that came up behind us who are working so hard. But it's really reassuring to see so many younger people active and taking part in these conversations and ready to carry them forward, because it's really you are what it's all about. It's your future we're talking about here, and you have to make it. So I'm so glad that so many of you are here and that more of you have been involved over the past year in the conversations that we've been holding. So, and the conversation continues. The next steps, the next 8 months, will involve a series of community roundtables, which our partners with the ministry and Arts BC are going to be collaborating on. We hope to take this conversation to every corner of the province and to every sector, including the sectors that aren't represented here, and to every community of interest, community of identity, and community of place. And we look forward to your help in doing that and making that a successful outreach. Everyone in this room will be hearing from me one way or another, either personally or in group emails in the coming months, and I look forward to hearing back from you and fielding your ideas and harnessing your enthusiasm. I would like to thank our partners in making this days of effort possible. They obviously are friends with the Roundhouse Community Arts and Recreation Centre for their hospitality and their work here, for Max Guide, Opus, who have provided a bunch of materials, for Access to Music, who have provided the entertainment at lunch but did so much behind the scenes in helping us plan and prepare for this, and will be going forward with us, and to the new board and management of Arts BC, who are fully engaged and enthusiastic about genuinely making this a province-wide conversation. So we're delighted that all of you have stepped forward, and we thank you very much. And I would like to get out of the way now and ask the Poet Laureate of New Westminster, Candace James, to come forward and send us home with some inspiring words. Candace?
Thank you very much, Kevin, and it's nice to see so many people involved in the arts, and it's nice to see the mandate is going to be going for all of British Columbia. Without arts, we really would be very, very boring people. I wrote a poem a few years ago that I thought would be fitting for this occasion. It's about art through the ages, and it's called Tumbling Down. Shakespeare said it with quill and ink, and inspiration's golden link, and the words came tumbling down. In sonnets and verses, plays and prose, theaters and traveling minstrel shows, his passion still rages and spills from the pages onto the glitter of sound sets and stages, tumbling down, still tumbling down. Mozart said it with notes and keys in compositions and symphonies, and the music came tumbling down, illuminating the darkness undressing, saints, sinners, and lovers confessing the agonies and ecstasies in serenades and rhapsodies, tumbling down, still tumbling down. Michelangelo said it with paints and brush, guided by an angel's touch, and the colors came tumbling down to halo the Sistine Chapel ceiling, saints, cherubs, and angels kneeling in a masterpiece of holiness, saving grace and forgiveness, a tribute to the man's genius, tumbling down, still tumbling down. Artists, musicians, poets, and sages, droplets of gold on history's pages, tumbling down throughout the ages. Their world of beauty surrounds us still. Their legacy is a living will, tumbling down, forever tumbling down. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Candace. There's nothing more to say. Go and enjoy the sunshine. Thank you all.